Out of Shasta College Humanities 4 film studies the night before Halloween. Hope you all got your costumes ready, plenty of candy for those greedy children that'll be pounding into your doors. Of course, where I live in my neighborhood, the kids are terrified of these doors to pound on, so no worries there. The monsters are inside waiting. Um, I'm going to hit horror pretty hard this week because it's such a large part of the American cinema experience, starting with early stuff, silent films like Nosferatu, which is an early telling of the vampire story, not Dracula, not the handsome, sexy Dracula that you all have come to know and love. This is a creepy dude who looks like a large rat and behaves horribly. But he's what he is. He's part of his nature. He is evil, but that's how he rolls. And German film, where they used what they called expressionism. The sets are hand drawn, and the acting is truly scary. There's no dialogue, of course. It is silent films. And then there was another German film came out along in that same era called The Cabinet of Dr. Kilgari, and it really showed German expressionism, artistic expressionism at its height. Nothing made sense. The rooms were angled in ways that you've never seen a room angled before. The roofs were slanted. Stairways were creepy. They go up, they go down, they go sideways. The acting is pretty realistic. It's about a psycho doctor who creates a zombie who goes out killing everybody. Is that what everybody wants to do? Get your own zombie who do your dirty work for you? Of course, they cop out at the very end because it turns out to be a dream. Oh, nothing's worse than a cop out. But those two movies alone have spawned hundreds and hundreds of movies who are trying to capture what those black and white silent movies captured. And it's not easy. During the 30s, when the rise of Nazism was coming into this world of woe, um, monster movies in Hollywood, especially pre-code Hollywood, that's from 30 to 34 in that era, sprang up because they were popular. Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Invisible Man, the Wolfman. These were all hugely popular for youngsters at the time. Now you look at them now, they look old and cranky, and they're not that scary looking, but if you really look deeper, there's a lot of psychological stuff going on there that is truly terrifying. And Bride of Frankenstein is better than the original Frankenstein. The monster in Frankenstein, by the way, is doesn't have a name. He's just a monster. He's lonely. He'd like to have a mate, and so Doctor Frankenstein says, "Well, let's build him a mate." And so they build a woman for him, and I guess they figured he was not gay, so they didn't build another guy for him. And so they build this woman. The monster's looking forward to meeting his new pal, his new girlfriend. And when she comes out and they wake her up, she takes one look at him and she screams. And his feelings are very hurt. The bride rejects the monster. And guess what he does to get payback? Kills everybody. That's which this is normal reaction. And so the bride was actually more original and terrifying than the first one. Um, right now on Criterion Network, if you know what that you have to pay for it. Of course, this is a streaming service for serious cinephiles. They're having a whole Halloween month on horror films from all the decades. And right now I'm watching all these ones from the pre-code era, which is Hollywood before the code came into be in 1934. The Island of Lost Souls, The Loneliest Darkest House, which was really good. Doctor X, 13 Women, really original films of our innermost psychic fears. Why do we have so? Why are we afraid of things? I mean, I understand it's a scary world right now. What scares me more than anything is a guy coming in the workplace with an automatic weapon and taking everybody out because his girlfriend rejected him. That to me is true modern day terror over something else like a ghost or Satan, and that's another big theme in these old films. What makes a ghost so angry that they have to come back and mess up people's lives? Are they coming back for revenge? Are they just having fun? Why does a ghost do what they do? And why are we so terrified of them? They're just dead spirits, and technically a ghost can't touch you or harm you, technically. And so they have to terrify you with sounds in the night, sightings of weird things in the night, beds, what's under your bed at night. Um, and we're all haunted by ghosts. um, of some, and we're terrified of ghosts. And these films were have gained popularity over the years, and each decade has its own set of horror movies reflecting the culture that the films were made. The 30s had the monster movies because of the rise of Nazism was a real horror that was about to be unleashed on the entire world. And the 40s didn't have too many. They had some interesting horror films like the Catwoman, Cat People, I should say, and some others, but it wasn't. The war was good enough. That wasn't enough horror in the world. The World War II. The world was at war. We came out of the Cold War, and the big themes in horror movies was the atomic bomb, atomic radiation, and so the 50s gave rise to films with like The Thing and Who Goes There, which is essentially the Thing, Them, large tarantulas, large ants that are large because they've been feeding and living off nuclear waste. That was a real horror because people were afraid. They didn't know what all this nuclear atomic radiation, what it would do to us or to other creatures. We have no idea, and we still don't, folks. They found when Chernobyl, you've never heard of that. It's in Russia. It was a nuclear power plant that melted down, and they had to abandon an entire area of Russia. It's uninhabitable, but over the years, people have started to move back, and they found some very particular things. They found two-headed fish. They found animals that had been altered by breathing and living on radiation. So don't think it's safe to breathe, folks. It's going to make a bunch of freaky monsters we have to deal with. And that's what the 50s was all about. The paranoia of the Cold War brought about these images of nuclear nuclear animals that had been changed by living and breathing off of nuclear atomic waste. The 60s, we had horror films that were Roger Corman made a series of them. If you watch the documentaries, he read Raging Bulls. He adopted some no, uh, Edgar Allan Poe stories, but they were kind of quirky and funny. He kind of played it for laughs, and he used a lot of old film stars who had been in the original horror movies, like Lon Chaney Sr., Lon Chaney Jr., Boris Karloff, Vincent Price starred in all those movies, and these guys starred in the horror movies in the 30s and 40s. And so was it, but they kind of played it tongue in cheek. They did, and so it was kind of safe horror. Wasn't true horror until we got into the 70s. And a movie called The Exorcist, 1973, scared the bejesus out of people, still does. Have you seen The Exorcist, the original, not this horrible remake? They've had several sequels, none of them are any good. The original, which is directed by William Friedkin, who just died this year, um, is a truly horrifying movie about a little girl, Reagan, who is possessed by Satan, and it's not a pretty sight, folks. She's this 12-year-old girl who's put through a living hell, actually. They bring in the priest to try to exorcise the demon out of her. They do, but at a huge cost. Huge cost. And when that movie came out, it was a huge box office hit. Like if you watch these Raging Bulls, you know what I'm talking about. And people were love to go back and see it over and over again. Why do they want to keep seeing it? They like to be terrified, horrified. Interesting in our psychic, why we have this need. Think about this now, because you're going to be writing your paper about it. And I know you're going to do great. Uh, the 70s also saw The Omen, which is another um, story about a child possibly possessed by, once again, Satan. And it's an evil child. And having evil children is kind of a theme throughout the years. In the 60s, they had um, different movies with evil children. Um, Children of the Corn from the 70s, the 80s. Why do you think we're horrified at children? You tell me what you think. Maybe when you write your paper, you could talk about that, write about that. Anyway, then we had movies in the 70s, more of a slasher, like Halloween, kind of is the forerunner to that, Friday 13th. These movies were mostly about a killer who's terrorizing usually sexy young teens who are off living in a cabin having sex together, and they're going to pay the price for that. What do you think they're trying to say there, folks? Don't have sex out of wedlock. Don't have sex before marriage, or a psycho killer will show up and murder you. That's pretty blatant symbolism. But in the midst of all that, and Freddy Krueger's Nightmare, Nightmare on Elm Street, um, that's really a terrifying film because, well, we all have to sleep, right? We have to sleep. We have no choice. We have to eat. We have to sleep, folks. We can't get around either one of those. And Freddy only comes to visit you when you're sleeping at your most vulnerable state of mind, and he entraps you. He comes up. He can murder people through your sleep, and you can't escape him because he comes to you in your nightmares. You might recognize some of the early actors like Johnny Depp and stuff were in those movies before they got to be big actors, whatever. And Wes, um, I'm going to forget his name now. Wes Craven directed those films. He just died a couple years ago. He did some truly horrifying. He did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is really a brutal film based on supposedly a real event. Um, a guy was slaughtering people and making them into sausage to sell at the market. Um, Alfred Hitchcock was a great horror director. His was more psychological. You didn't see a monster. The birds, the birds are attacking things. Um, but his most famous one is Psycho with Anthony Perkins, based on a real character, real life dude who used to kill people and skin them and dress up in their skins. Just an average dude who was didn't have nothing to do, and he also probably killed his mother, and he liked to dress up in her clothes. And he's running a hotel now, and of course, the woman who stays in the hotel is going to regret that because he's coming for her. Psycho, yeah, Tony Perkins, Anthony Perkins, the actor, never outlived that. I mean, he died of AIDS later, but he couldn't shake that role. That role defined who he was. He did it so well. Alfred Hitchcock was a good horror director because a lot of it was psychological, not slasher murder type stuff, although there is that absolutely in Psycho. These are I'm just throwing this stuff out there. My favorite horror film came out about 1965. It's called The Haunting. They made a series of it a couple years ago called The Haunting of Hill House. It's based on a Shirley Jackson novel. It's true. I thought when I saw that as a kid, it scared me for years. I had nightmares about that movie. You don't see a monster. It's all psychological. Four people staying a weekend in a haunted house. I mean, we're talking a house that's as big as 50 houses. No, they don't build houses that big anymore. Well, maybe if you're Jeff Bezos, you have a house like that. I bet it's haunted too. Because what do you do with all those rooms? You spend all your life in one room. I'm in one room. My bed's over there, my TV's there, my guitars are out there. I don't need any more than that. Well, if your house is so big, you got 25 bedrooms upstairs and 15 bathrooms. What's up there at night? You live in a house with you, your wife, your kids, maybe if you're lucky, a dog. You live in one or two rooms, the kitchen, maybe. What's going on upstairs? Those rooms are all dark, they're all shut off. That's the scary thing about a house. Why do we make supposed safe places like a house something to be afraid of? What's going on in our own houses? That's something you can write about. I'm giving you a lot of hints here now because the horror is within us. It's not out there. Yes, there are assholes out there with the guns, and there are horrible people out there. War, what they're going through in the Gaza Strip right now is truly terrifying. But what's going on in our own houses? We don't know. We don't know what goes on across the street from us. We assume everybody's happy. They're all eating dinner together. They're all watching the same movies. No, they're not. There's some evil crap going on in a lot of people's houses: abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual abuse. There's a lot of horror out there. So there's this need to see that horror in films. We go to movies as a sort of release from the stress of our lives. Do you go to horror films? Do you like them? They're re-releasing a new Exorcist right now. Are you going to go see that? Did you see the original? Um, why do you want to go? What does it do for you? This is what I want you to write your paper about. Then later on, there was some films that had humor in them because sometimes these things are so absurd that they can be funny. And there's a series of film called The Evil Dead, Part One, Two, Three, which Part One is not humorous, but two and three definitely are. They're really funny. They're horrifying, but they're actually a lot of humor in it, and so you're laughing at the horror. So there's an outlet. You're just not scared to death. You're laughing through your fear. So that's a good release, but doesn't it didn't make it any less terrifying if you can laugh at it. I don't know. You tell me. So then we come to movies like The Shining, Stephen King's book. Um, Jack Nicholson, Stanley Kubrick directing it, and I just recently saw it again, and it really holds up about the guy and his wife and his his child that he's abusing, folks. They have to be caretakers in this hotel out in the middle of nowhere. They're the only people at this hotel taking care of the hotel because it's closed for the winter. And it's a psychological horror about a psycho killer, which is Jack Nicholson. He's going to have a complete nervous breakdown and he's going to try to murder his own child, his wife, and all the fun that comes from that. Have you seen it, The Shining? I recommend it. Then we have movies like Halloween, which is essentially a psycho killer in a mask is killing everybody with a big knife or a machete or some kind of stabbing. They don't shoot people. That's our horror right now. Um, just getting shot when you go down to Starbucks. Um, Movies like The Omen and The Exorcist is all God and Satan based. Um, what drives a movie like Hill House is the ghosts of past lives in a house. Can a house be evil? Do you believe that? I don't know. Or do we put our fears into that house? Because there's always these haunted house movies where the house itself is the monster. How can a house where we live in, go to sleep in, eat in, watch TV in be against us? What prompts that? Usually it's past lives that have occupied that house. But there's a movie that was a very popular movie. If I can think of it real quick, I'll come up with it. It's a new house. So there's no old dead people that live there, but they built the house on top of an ancient Native American burial ground, and it's the spirits of those people that are going to make this house a living hell. It's called the Poltergeist movie. Very, very popular movie in the day in the 80s, and starts with a frightened child because children, like dogs or cats, they kind of have a sense about things, and maybe they see things quicker. And of course, you see it in every movie, honey, when the parents are going, "That's your imagination." But mommy, I saw a ghost in the bedroom. Honey, that's your imagination. Well, you know what? They should listen to the kid once in a while because maybe there is something in the bedroom. Listen to your children, folks. Okay, so that's a brief take on horror. This is Halloween. Hope you get your costumes ready. Who's going as what do you go as? What's the popular costume now? You tell me. Post things if you want on the discussion. How you feel about Halloween? Does it mean anything to you? Why? Why not? Or does it mean everything to you? Anyway, I'm going to sign a new paper. I don't know what essay it is. I'd have to go look. I think it's 8, maybe. Why horror matters. Why has horror been such a driving influence in cinema for the entire time cinema's existed? We've wanted to film scary stories. We like being scared. Do we? Or I avoid it personally. But some people will go see a scary movie over and over again. It's just like some people like riding roller coasters or hang gliding or parachuting. Why? I asked somebody in class once why they like that, and they go, I like almost being taken to the edge of death. Really? Hmm. Okay. Anyway, is that the reason why we like to do these things? Watch movies because we want to experience it without actually doing it? Possibly. You can write about it. That's what your essay is. I'm going to talk to you again later on this week. I'm going to go on a road trip, so I won't have my computer for 2 days, but I'll be in touch with you. Um, Hope you saw my comments on the grading of the quizzes. Um, Please pay attention to those comments and keep up on your journals. We're winding down, folks. Class ends in about 8 weeks, 7 weeks. So we're winding down. We got to go the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and it's a free for all because cinema is alive. Is it well or is it sick? That's what we're addressing. So until then, the story of film continues.